we've talked a little bit about the other funds that exist, and so this just shows you, outside of the general fund, which is the first bar, all the other different types of funds that the city has. And so the bulk of them are what we call special revenue funds. This is hard to see, so I apologize. Hopefully you can see it in your printed copy. So I'm actually going to skip ahead 1 minute. Well, I'll stay here. This shows all of those special revenue funds as well as your debt service funds that we talked about. And one thing we wanted to show is, so these are the other places where the city would have funds, but in order to be a special revenue fund under NASB 54, which we implemented, was it 1 year or 2 years ago now? It was 2 years ago. It has to, the fund has to have a restricted revenue source. So for these funds, you can see it's major streets, local streets are your first two. That comes from your Act 51 money. There are restrictions on that money. You cannot go and use those funds for general purpose, for unassigned purposes like your general fund. Police, forfeiture, treasury, justice, community development, block grant, these are all grant money funds that have restricted uses. The building department, DARE is also restricted, NSP is also a restricted grant. Taylor Building Authority, so here's where we're looking at that those millages came in when we moved out the building authority from the general fund. If I move to the revenue side, here's the $2.7 million that came into play for that millage that's now not in the general fund, which is part of why our revenue declined. And then you also have some other debt service funds. The other thing to look at is the bottom line, and notice the fund balances that are existing in some of these funds. In most cases, you will see that you use fund balance this year. So for major streets, local streets, those fund balances have gone down. One item to note is the major street fund pays for a 2008 transportation bond. Those bond payments will be increasing over the next few years. So more major street fund money will be dedicated to pay those payments and will not be as free for other things that you used it for.
Was the increase just part of the terms of the bond?
Yes. Yep. It's just how the payments were structured. One other item that you've used heavily from is your justice forfeiture fund. And you used, the change this year was another $452,000. So you do bring in revenue every year, but you're down to about $600,000. So over the past 2 years collectively, you've paid about $2 million in police overtime, unbudgeted overtime, out of that fund. You can see this year you brought in about $500,000 and there's around $600,000 sitting there. So as you go forward and look at 14, 15, and 16, you're not allowed to budget for those revenues because there's no guaranteed money coming in. It's based on the cases and how they settle. But it'll be important when you look at what your general fund expenditures are, because if that pot's not big enough to cover what you've been covering, that'll be a cost that you'll have to consider how you want to handle it.
And Carrie, did that law change last year that allowed us to use these funds for unbudgeted overtime?
It's been a few years. I think it was maybe even the year before that.
Okay, so a couple of years.
It's been a couple of years that's been.
So previous, we could not utilize any of these funds for salaries. So we would have to use these for purchases of equipment, vehicles, and then there was some relief that was given, I guess, maybe 2 years ago then, that allowed us to use these types of monies for unbudgeted overtime. So it gave us some relief, but as Carrie indicated, when they're gone, if you don't have programs and don't have opportunities, then these funds continue to shrink.
Yeah, we're all out there getting semis for cash. So.
Well, that's one of those interdiction programs are beneficial in a lot of ways.
So I think the other message with that is when you look at what was paid out of there this year and what's available at the end of the year in that fund, so $950 was paid out of it this year. If you flash back to the balance sheet here, and on the balance sheet side, there's around $600,000, a little north of that, that's available. So that combined with any revenue that comes in is really where your cap is at and what can be paid out of there. So managing that overtime is going to be important as well. So that's the cost side of it. You know, you're going to have some justice revenues, but as Carrie mentioned, you can't budget for that in the special revenue fund legally. And so the general fund is going to have to be cautious in how you're budgeting those overtime costs and who's going to fund them.
Well, where in the
depending on how you utilize them, but yes, it will.
So moving on to look at some other items to consider for the city. So one other significant area to watch is the city's legacy costs. And I know that's not a new comment. It's something we've been talking about for a very long time. What this slide highlights is the past 5 years, and it looks at your retiree health costs as well as your retirement contributions. So when you're looking up at the health costs, you can see that really this year is kind of the first year it's, I want to say, stabilized. There was a slight decline because I know that you've been actively working on those policies, but you have seen, so in 2009, your total, this is just retiree health costs, were $4.3 million. In 2013, they were $5.9 million. So even in that 4-year time, that's a significant increase. And most of that burden is more, especially for the general employees, by the general fund. You do have the Act 312 millage, Act 345 millage, that helps you with police and fire, but you don't have a similar revenue stream for your general employees. The other piece of that is funding the pensions, which is the retirement contributions. And so you can see, so we have general employees, the defined contribution, and then the police and fire. So police and fire contribution is funded by your Act 345, and you have the ability to levy the millage where you need it to help offset those costs. So if you look at the millage rate for police and fire, in 2009 you were at 5.3 mils. In 2013 you're up to 6.9. That would have been above, north of 8 mils if the TIFA had not forgiven its capture. I think there's one more year. Is it through 2014 right now that it stands?
I'm sorry, could you restate that number?
It would have been above 8 mils.
Above 8?
In order to offset your police and fire costs if you hadn't, if TIFA hadn't not captured those millages. So there's been a significant increase in the millage rate, as you can see, because the pension contribution has continued to increase as well. So 5.4 million in 2009, now we're over $6 million for police and fire. For general employees, there's also an increase. In the next couple slides, we'll look at why that's happening. But you'll see 2.5 million in 2009, now you're up to 3.1 million. But again, there's no, I mean, your general fund is funding that pension payment. So this is the general employees pension, and it's important to keep in mind the general employees system operates on a December year end. So they're a little bit different, and we are a little behind on our actuarial valuations, and we'll have a comment on that in the letter, so that's why we're only through 2010. But you can see that the value of the assets in that 3 years has declined, and your AAL, which is your accrued liability, has increased. And so as a result, your funded percentage is declining. And part of that is we know about the investment losses that happened over a period of time, and the actuary smoothed that over a period. And so you're starting to feel the impact of those losses on your pension dollars, and your contribution is going up to help compensate for that. The story is pretty similar if we look at police and fire. So you'll see here, again, your actuary value of your assets are declining, your liability is increasing, and now your funded percentage is down to 62. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe when I started on the audit, the general employees was fully funded, like 8 years ago maybe? 8 to 9 years ago. And now, on the previous slide, it said 66% funded.